Right, so it is 4 of us for this, and we're actually telling a little bit of story, how this has gone throughout the years, because legal skills has been at Leicester for several years, certainly when I arrived, which was really 13 years ago, and as a new member of staff, I was given learn legal skills. And I don't know why there is this perception that is something that everybody can do, so you have new member of staff, nobody wants to do, just what was at that time, it was called learning legal skills. It lasted just a term, just until Christmas, and was divided in 5 workshops. We always very keen to say the workshop, not seminars, because they're very hands-on. And in the first one, we told them how to read cases and materials, and we gave them a case and a piece of a statute to look at and answer some questions. Then, in the second one, we told them the difference between the black letter approach and the social legal approach. You can imagine we had 2 hours, so it was really run. The third one was computer skills, and it started in a little room with 7 or 8 people, and I remember we were doing, can you try to put biscuit and strawberries, and then can you try to do them with goose eyes, and then with a plus in between, with an and. And now, of course, it got more and more sophisticated. And the students get much, much better than us, really, at that. Then we had how to write legal academic essays and how to present your work. In the second term, in the second semester, we had something which was called analyzing law, and was really, we started reading at cases. But at that stage, I never got to do that. Now, the story is, I arrived, I did it for a year, then I went on maternity leave, and I came back and I found something else for me and moved on. Then I went part-time. When I came back, I said, oh, learning legal skills. The person who was doing it was on leave, so I said, you can do it. And that's how I re-inherited 3 years ago. Surprise, surprise, 10 years down the line, it was very much the same. So I think we need to do something. But the good things of those courses, which I thought is really worth having, is because I found it was very hands-on. We didn't have lots of time, but in that little time, students were really doing something. They had to read the case, they had to answer questions, and they had to discuss and present. And we always got reasonably good feedback. What was the problem that I've encountered in those years? First of all, is that we were dealing with something which was continuously changing. As we said before, it's a process. We couldn't teach what we were teaching 10 years before, or even what we were teaching 2 years before. The students got more and more, and now we have, how many? 450 students in the first year, and they have different abilities, because some of them are postgrads, some of them come from Canada and have already done a degree, some of them come straight from school. So what you teach them ideally should be tailored, but we don't have the time, we can't do that. And the problems also has always been the assessment. How do we assess them? We used to assess them at the end of each unit on what they had done. So we had 20 minutes for the assessment. We did the course, and then 20 minutes, take out a piece of paper and write. And then we moved on to a sort of mid-term assessment, mid-course assessment, which was based on computer skills, and then on exams. And then we went to an exams, and we've changed it again this year with the mid-course assessment and the exam. One of the things which has never been there until a couple of years ago was the involvement of the librarian. So I don't know why, and I'm happy to say that I'm not the only one who thought, oh, I haven't thought about that. Maybe because it's something we have learned to do, we have learned to do research, so they will learn, but it did create issues. So Off you go. Over to you.
Well, I am the invisible librarian. I joined the University of Leicester as their law librarian about 2 years ago now. Time has gone very, very quickly as well. I'm not actually invisible, and I've got quite a kind of profile on the internet and social media, so I'm very easy to track down if you want to. But for the intents and purposes of this presentation, we're going to pick up the theme of why I might be invisible throughout the course as well. I'm the only law librarian at the University of Leicester, and that's probably something that's quite common in the room as well. So there are no other subject specialists within the library. And I support the entire law school, which includes about 450 undergraduates in the first year alone. So you can multiply that by 3, and then add the postgraduates and the academic staff, and you get an idea of the sort of job that I have. However, I'm not just the law librarian. It's common for us to have more than one subject, and a lot of you may support criminology as well. However, I have 7 other departments within the College of Arts, Humanities and Law at Leicester University. Obviously criminology. Law is the biggest department that I support by far, but the other 2 big ones are English and history, and history take up quite a lot of my time as well. Then I've got smaller departments like history of art and museum studies. So I am quite eclectic in the sort of subjects that I support, and it has an effect on the amount of support that I can provide to people as well, the amount of teaching that I can do physically in a 37-hour week as well. In terms of my contribution to the Introduction to Law module that we're talking about, I deliver a 1-hour lecture at the start of the first semester of the first year, so in October of their first semester, in this lovely lecture theatre here, Peter Williams Lecture Theatre at the university. It is the only place on campus big enough to accommodate 450 law students. So it's the only option I've got for delivering this lecture. So teaching space and teaching timetable is quite a significant issue for me. So what I do is deliver what would like be a traditional introduction to the library, so library induction and introduction to key legal research skills. We focus very much on low-level information literacy skills, so how students find the books, the journal articles, the cases and the legislation that are on their reading lists that they will read for their first couple of weeks and months or at university. So it is very much getting them started and not really taking it much beyond that point as well. So I say I have a 1-hour lecture, I actually have a 50-minute lecture, and this might be quite common to those of you who teach in big rooms as well. So we have to allow 5 minutes at the start and the end of each lecture for our students to come in and out of the lecture theatre, and often they take longer than that as well, so 50 minutes tops. And you can see the sorts of things that I cover and the amount of time that I have to dedicate to those things. So it is a very tight timetable, and it's a whistle-stop tour of what is the library and what is legal research. So very, very quick. I do try to make it a little bit more interesting for them, so it's not just me talking at them for an hour. So we sort of show them about the support materials that are available for them, including online tutorials that we've developed, and also live demonstrations of the library website and some of the key legal research databases. So we're trying to cram quite a lot into that 1 hour. In terms of the online tutorials, I've got 5 tutorials, each of about 10 minutes in length, that cover key skills of how to find cases, how to find legislation, how to find journal articles, and another 2 on how to use legal dictionaries and legal encyclopedias. They're all on our library website, so they're freely available for you to look at if you want to at any point, or just let me know and I'll send you the link. They were actually developed to support our distance learning postgraduate law students, but they are quite integral in the amount of support that we can provide to our 150 undergraduate first years as well. So they form this dual role in a sense. In terms of what's good about what I do, you might not think that a 1 hour sort of library lecture is particularly new or innovative, and it's not. I say it's quite old-fashioned in a sense, and many of you may have been doing this 10 or 20 years ago. However, it's new for us. As Eugenia was saying, 2 years ago was the first time our undergraduate law students had any input from the law librarian at all in their teaching. So we're moving on, even if we're catching up, I think, but we're certainly moving on. It is the only time that I see all of the undergraduate law students, so in that 1 hour lecture at the beginning of their course. I might not see them again for the rest of their 3 or 4 year degree, unless they seek me out, which they are very welcome to do, and I tell them how to do that in this lecture, or unless they do the dissertation in their final year, which is optional for students at our university. So in one way, what I'm trying to get over to them is 3 major things. First of all, that there is a library at the university. Second, that there is a law librarian. And thirdly, that there are these things called legal databases, and they really ought to know how to use them. So that's kind of what they need to go away with at the end of this lecture. So we're not talking high-level things. After that point, I return to being the invisible law librarian. So I go away again, and they might not ever see me again, unless they want to actually come and find me. So what's bad? You can probably see from this I've been doing a teaching and learning certificate, so there's quite a lot that's not particularly good about the lecture. So the key thing for me is there is absolutely no practical experience for the students. It's not interactive, they don't get a chance to practice any of the legal research skills that I talk about. They may sort of all sit there, and 450 of them, and nod their heads and say, yes, I can use a computer, and yes, I can do this. And they go away again, and perhaps they haven't really understood what it was and why they might need to use these skills as well in the future. So that's one of the key things. I actually have more contact teaching time with our distance learning postgraduate law students, and about 5 hours with them in the 1 hour with these particular students here. So in terms of my dream session, I don't think my dreams are too unrealistic. I don't think they're extravagant in any way, but I would like a longer session with them and for it to be more practical. So in a computer lab, hands-on, they get to practice, they also get to talk to me, to ask questions, and for me to provide feedback to them as well. So that they get to learn by doing rather than learn by watching. So I think that's a key skill for them to realise what their limitations are. Also looking to aim higher. So for them to introduce more advanced legal research skills, things we've talked about in this session already, so going beyond their reading list, becoming independent researchers, thinking about being more effective, efficient researchers, evaluating sources, and looking at ethics and referencing and all those sorts of things that come tied into it. I do run these sessions already, but with postgraduate students, so I know they're achievable. I can deliver them, and I know that they work as well. So the maths. Turning to student numbers again, our largest IT classroom on campus seats 50 students. So if we work out the maths, so naturally we're looking at 9 teaching sessions, 2 hours, that's 18 extra hours of teaching in October that would be required to deliver such a session. In terms of whether it's practical or not, there's 2 major considerations, and the first ones are related to timetabling and the availability of appropriate teaching rooms. I'm sure you face problems with actually getting your sessions timetabled and allocated to appropriate rooms, so that could be a big issue, particularly when there are so many students involved. And the second is my actual workload. I did 56 hours teaching in October. I can't physically add another 18 to those, it would kill me. So it's not practical for me to be able to deliver this session either. So in terms of returning to the theme of the invisible librarian, we've been looking at a sort of model where I write legal research materials, but I don't deliver them. I leave that to my colleagues here, who would deliver them as being the academics within the law school. Might be controversial, but they tell me that they're quite happy for me to write materials and for them to deliver it. There may be academics in other institutions that would be horrified by such a thought, that the librarian would tell them what they were teaching. But that's certainly something that we're looking at for the future, so that Although I'm involved in the teaching, I remain invisible behind the scenes, so I'm not actually the person delivering these these teaching materials. We're also looking at how we might use the timetable more effectively. So we have tutorials, 2 hour tutorials with the academic tutors, one of which is an IT surgery. We're perhaps looking at seeing whether that can be changed so that it becomes a compulsory legal research skills tutorial with your academic rather than something that's voluntary and drop-in. And for those students, very few that might attend it or think they know everything that's involved. Other things we're looking at is how we can better use e-learning technology. So I mentioned I've got lots of online tutorials that already exist. They could be improved. We could do more with that and embed them into the curriculum more. I'm sure we're all aware that our database providers have some very good online training materials now as well, so we can make use of those and not actually reinvent the wheel all the time ourselves. And we're also looking at how we might pre-record lectures so that I can pre-record my lecture, perhaps make it more interactive and deliver it online only. And that is something that's quite appealing at the moment because I won't be there in October this year, I'll be on maternity leave. So the fact that I can deliver this lecture from the comfort of my own home might be something that's quite attractive, but also work in terms of sort of engaging with the student body a bit more. Okay, so the future is I'm not going to suddenly start doing lots and lots more teaching. I'm going to continue to be the invisible librarian, but hopefully work more effectively with the department. We've presented a case study here that's not perfect, not by any means. We've come here for ideas and probably have more questions than answers today. But the main thing about us getting together to deliver this presentation is the fact that we've started to talk to each other and really start collaborating and thinking about the future of the module and how it is that I can be involved more in the teaching, not perhaps just in this particular module, but also looking forward into the other years as well. So perhaps not as part 1 of this process, but maybe a year or 2 down the line as well. I'll hand over to Dawn for something a little bit more innovative.
Yes. Okay, just very briefly, Eugenia was on study leave beginning of this academic year, and I'd made the mistake of saying that I'd be interested in doing some teaching in the first year, which I've never had any engagement with first years before. And somebody said, oh, why don't you convene the Introduction to Law course, which incorporates now the old analysing law, so the second term is more legal theory based. So I said, yes, I would do that because I had an ulterior motive. And much of my research is based in law and humanities, and I have an obsession with narratives and with the role of creativity, and the role of creativity in legal education. So with the consent of our lovely head of school, he allowed me to use part of the seminar to run a daring experiment with the students. And this is one of the outputs, if you like, from that experiment. It was called the Creative Case Study, or it is called the Creative Case Study. And it is something that I ran a research project with some students from Equity and Trusts in 2009-10, which was written up in 2011, where essentially we did some storytelling workshops and then we got students to engage with case law to write fictional narratives from case law. So in my great naive enthusiasm, I thought, well, obviously our first years can read James Boyd White, be inspired, seeing themselves as artists, then they can read my paper, get the pedagogical basis for this work, and then they can do this. So we gave them a choice of 3 cases, 2 of which obviously are key to 2 of their foundational subjects, Dudley and Stevens being the eating the man on the ship case, so that's very exciting. And we got them to do this and then present it as part of their presentation skills. So it really was kind of, it was my baby, if you like, that I managed to get incorporated into the course. Last week I managed to get some feedback from about 190 students, so not even half. There's a story to that. But here, so the feedback has been kind of not really conclusive in that nobody really said, not loads hate it, and not loads love it. But this is quite funny. So look at this. You get some students emailing. Some students, like some of them wrote screenplays. The snail was a caligram by a law retreat student, French student. Some people wrote poems. Somebody did a song. Somebody did a rap. Some people did diary entries. Some people did all manner of things. I didn't hear anything that was kind of embarrassingly bad. Some of it was breathtakingly brilliant. And I have got about 50 students who are willing, who are unfortunately self-selecting, who will give me feedback and will let me publish what they've done. But really I need kind of written feedback from the students who hated it, but they made me sit in the lecture going. So with their body language I get the sense, and some of them say this. So that was from so they will tell me this anonymously in feedback. So that was one innovation, and part of the discussion that we're having ongoing is whether, so that's, if you like, brings in this issue of the liberal arts education. This is like extreme liberal arts. So I had I had the academic director pop in and see me and say, she'd just heard that via a colleague who wishes to remain anonymous, that one of their first years had said that they needed to write a poem. And I thought, that can't be right. It is actually. But Mark said it was fine. So, much less controversially, we, in terms of writing, this was a kind of on-the-hoof innovation that for the students, a very kind colleague, Gemma Turton Taught, wrote this is probably as embedded as we get at the moment. She wrote a first class of 2-1 and a 2-2 answer to a taught problem, from which I then wrote the third and the fail, which was quite fun. And then we gave it to the students to assess, to put in order of merit, if you like, and to write feedback on the 2-2 answer. There was a great deal of discussion around what was the difference between a 2-2 and a 2-1 answer. And you can see from the feedback there, that gives you a bit of a better picture, that students have generally said they found that really helpful. So that's slightly less controversial. Now to something more serious again.
Sorry, yeah, I know. I guess as is fairly typical for academics, I was drafted into this module as well for the first time this year. And as is usually, we're trying to track with having what we thought seemed like very, very good ideas, and then thinking, oh, how do we assess this now? And we asked that question rather late in the day, and it's a question that's really at the top of our minds at the moment. So it's something that we're very early in our thinking on. And the approach we've taken to this course means we've got a lot of complex questions to think about that we haven't answered in anything like a satisfactory way yet. So the problems that we started with is, as Eugenia said, she's pointed to that we have a diverse range of students, as I know this is typical, but even more I think so in Leicester, because Eugenia mentioned the senior status students we have. I think we're up to close to 50% now of our LLB students have already done a degree. So when you think about the assessment, you think, what is it that we're assessing here? We assume that they're coming with a different range of competencies, but we don't have a baseline for that at all. So we're just working with assumption here and what it is that we want to assess them on, and working out a way of understanding the trajectory of learning that they might have gone on and how that will be different for our diverse range of students. So that's one of the starting points that creates difficulty for us, or some questions. And then this is really the key, and I'd be very interested to hear what other people thought about this as well. Creating an assessment that at least appears to be sufficiently rigorous for the students. I think this is the problem, because as we're all aware, students, there is this magic expectation that nobody will ever get over 80% in a university assessment, that we're aiming for something around the 70% mark. And how do we translate that into a skills-based assessment as well, without, and the problem that we've experienced previously in the model that Eugenia was describing of teaching, where you have these ongoing online assessments, is where students are managing to achieve 90–95%, then the course was getting written off as a noddy course. And they would say, well, that's just really easy. So it became, and I think that message was getting passed on to students as well, so there was this real question mark over how serious or significant this course was in the academic world. And so that's, and unfortunately, so we've been pushed into a feeling that we ought to do something more rigorous. And we've actually, I think we've fallen into a bit of a trap here, I think. And I guess I still have a question about why shouldn't a student be able to achieve 100%? I'm not sure we can really look ourselves in the mirror and answer that, provide an easy answer to that question. Agreeing what the core skills are that we're assessing, you will have gathered that we've got a range of interests among the team members. For some of us, it's more about the mechanical skills. For some of us, it's more about assessing critical capacity, to encourage students to approach data in a rigorous and critical fashion. For others, it's a bit more about, I guess, creative engagement with the data that we're collecting. So trying to put all this together into an assessment format is a real challenge and raises lots of questions for us. And then, of course, the practicalities, you've heard about our numbers. How do we mark these assessments? We're not doing something online, which we're moving away from for the very pressures that we've spoken about. And how do we do it? We're all now suddenly, well, I say all, apart from the invisible librarian, swamped with this pile of assessments now. So we need to, we realize this is a pressing question for us. And we don't have, as already been mentioned today, really the technical knowledge to think, that's the solution, okay, as academics. We know intuitively there must be something better out there, but we don't have that technical knowledge. I'll just briefly mention, now I realise we've taken up quite a lot of time because we've come up as a team, but a couple of other more fundamental issues that we're dealing with when we think about assessment. And I really see this as a problem of abstraction here. First up, I think our model isn't particularly unusual in dealing with these skills in the first year and seeing them as a kind of an early skill to address. But teaching these skills in abstraction, and that came out in the conversations that we had in our group earlier, it's really challenging to create a meaningful assessment process. Students don't engage with these skills in abstraction. They find it's not the skills in the way they're delivered in a separate module don't seem purposeful. And it's hard to, I think, ignite the students' passion because they're not, let's say, trying to answer a question that they can really engage with. They're being assessed on very particular skills in the abstract. So it's a mission without a purpose. And I think that can be problematic. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have an assessment. I think that's hard, and leave the assessment to the substantive modules. I think it's hard to accept that because there's so much focus that we've already mentioned today the students have on being all about assessment. Having an assessment somehow signifies the importance of what we're doing and emphasises the importance of these skills. So to actually not have an assessment, I think, would be a difficult conclusion to reach. I think it's also useful to have an assessment, if not vital, because it's about gap spotting. I think one of the things that we've touched on today is the gap between what students think they can do and what they can do. And I think that the skills that we've been speaking about are particularly vulnerable to this because students are aware that they have certain competences relating to this area. They feel like they know how to use a computer. They do know how to use a computer, as Eugenia said, something better than us often. But that doesn't, I think they're really vulnerable to assuming then follow-up skills from that. Therefore, of course I wouldn't know how to use a legal database. So it's all part of what I do. So I think we do need to identify for students the gaps that they might have, to demonstrate the reality of the skills that they have, and to identify they can seek the librarian's help where it's needed. I think the abstraction as well that we've spoken about, this kind of first year teaching, therefore go and teach learning legal skills, I think we can identify there a problematic assumption among legal academics that there's something really distasteful about having to do this. Okay, it's really it's quite embarrassing to admit that your students don't have to create bibliography or do footnoting. It's just not, they really ought to be able to. So I think there's a real impatience among academics. We may explain this divide that we have between academics and librarians, because we really don't want to get our hands dirty with that. We just assume, and if they can't do it, then the schools are at fault and A-levels are all getting easier anyway, and so we're not. So I think that explains this gap. But another issue that we need to address here, we're sending out a message really that this is really something that we don't, as academics, want to bother ourselves with. So we've kind of shunted this off in some ways, the skills base, to the librarian. And that means that when we create an assessment, then, how do we do that without talking to the librarian? And that's a historical problem we've had as well. That's what we've been doing, but it just makes absolutely no sense at all. And we're not actually asking of the librarian and the students what they've done in the time that Jackie spent with them. So the assessment is kind of mismatched in that way. And I think also on the flip side of that, which is something else that we've touched on today, I think it's possible that given that sort of shunting off of this embarrassing subject to the librarian, I think it may encourage students to take the librarian's contribution less seriously if she's demonstrably not involved in assessment, and if students are constantly having reinforced, as they do from 4-year-olds, probably 2-year-olds now, that it's all about assessment, then if Jackie's not seen to be involved in that, then why would students take what she's doing seriously? Then we're sending out the wrong message to them about the importance of the skills, her physical separateness from us. The students are blind to this difference. So, as I say, I think this is sending out a difficult message too when it comes to us thinking about assessment. I think that's probably enough. I think we've gone well over time. But just so we're in the middle of thinking that we certainly don't have anything like the right answer yet. We've been barking up some long trees this year, so we're hoping for some feedback and an opportunity to reflect on this. So, thank you. That's
Questions? Yes?
Jackie, I mean, you look after other subjects.
Yes.
I mean, just to say, what skills or lack of, in terms of research, you see in other subjects? Because we're very focused on law, but we're part of a much wider organisation.
One of the main problems I see is students at the very beginning of their degree. We show them how to find journal articles and other types of literature, but they don't understand what they are and why they might want to use them. I think it's kind of endemic throughout the whole student population, is the fact that we're teaching them to find particular things, but they don't really understand why it is they need to find them at that point. So we're teaching them at the wrong time, or we need to take them back a step and actually teach them what is a book, what's a journal, what is it to evaluate information. So we're not delivering that early enough. That tends to be the sort of thing that evaluation for me comes in the third year when they're doing dissertation skills, and it really ought to be taught in the first year. So I think that's a main thing.
School strategies, school librarians. I just thought I'd give our assessment, course, pass-fail, but they can't get their degree unless they're passed.
right.
And they can come back in second and third year. We do get people coming in second and third year with misfits in the first year, and they can do it.
We have to pass fail for legal skills.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about that, it depends a little bit on what the assessment is, because we used to have pass fail at Hertfordshire, and then the students who'd actually put an awful lot of work and effort in felt a bit cheated by pass, so then we went to pass fail good. So that, and that was a portfolio assessment, and also, and we do portfolio credit as well in legal skills, which is a lot of marking, but it's a little short bit, and it means you can have multiple choice. So the library assessment is an online multiple choice, and they can score very high marks. But it's slightly mediated then by the fact that they've got 40% for writing a case note, and so the proportions out slightly. How you get your overall mark, but portfolios have come with a whole range of problems in themselves. But yeah, the only thing with pass-fail is it involves more than quite straightforward assessment. Students who put a lot of work in you know, like a moot, if you've done a brilliant moot and the opponent wasn't that great, you might give it offset it really well. You will pass anyway. That's.
Do they get credit for the course?
They take a pass-through course to have to do it.
And there is credit that their degree is.
It's part of the first year, you have to pass all your first year courses, but it's not part of their overall degree classification. So, because of first year, and in fact we've got a new 15 credit legal skills coming into the second year, but we haven't taught it yet. So, because we used to have one long legal skills course across the whole of the first year, two semesters, or terms, semesters, we're always changing. And we've split it now, so we've got 15 credits in the first year, and we're going to do 15 credits in the second year, so that again we're building some of those skills, because it's that rush in, like, you know, reading cases, analysing cases, planning, good. And again, then the students think skills are done in the first year and it's finished. So, but we haven't taught the second into the year one yet, so we don't know.
And that will have to have some mark.
Yeah. And that will count towards their degree classification, so we that the high scores of the multiple choice.
Yeah, for which brings our senior status students, their first marks count, because
Yeah.